Well, with a vista like this and cars like this, Paul Tarsey, this can only be one place. The Rolex Pebble Beach Concours d'Elegance.
It is amazing, isn't it, Jim, that we stand here, and it's kind of one of those things where if you took any individual piece of this event, it would be stunning. Just to stand here and see that vista, doesn't get better than that. But we're standing in front of a car that competed in the 1934 Monaco Grand Prix. And that just kind of adds a bit of piquancy to the event, doesn't it?
There are a lot of special classes this year. There are a lot of special things. One of those is the anniversary of Ferrari and also the Centennial anniversary of Bentley, and what a better place to begin.
The anniversary of Bentley, I mean, yes, they've got cars right the way through from the very earliest right up to the present day here at Pebble Beach, and I think it's interesting to see just how they've evolved. People forget that W.O. Bentley, the founder, actually owned the company for a very short period of time. Brilliant designer. I mean, he designed engines for aeroplanes that were in the First World War, long before Bentley Motors. But he designed those things. Brilliant designer, absolutely dreadful businessman.
Well, the Centennial celebration is kind of an understatement, Paul. Here at Pebble Beach, this has been a world tour for Bentley, the Centennial celebration. These are some spectacular automobiles, aren't there?
There are very widely differing kinds of cars that we can see. Some which are very much built and still are road cars. We have some which are very, very different. We have a car here which is in original condition, let's say, which I love. I love that whole thing of it not being over restored, not being really heavily done. And then we come through all of these great classics that we see in front of us, up to this car with the French style number 2 on the side, on the hood, and that's a French style number 2 because this car is a 1927 Bentley 3-litre speed model. It's the last ever works-centered team car and was built for the 1927 Le Mans 24-hour race. It was driven by Georges Dulé and Baron Élanger and was involved in that famous White House crash where nearly all of the Bentley team collided into each other or other people and very, very lost the whole team. So very, very much steeped in history. The car, of course, carrying the hood, because back in those times, part of the regulation was to stay and do the first few laps without the hood down. You had to run the first few laps with the hood up, stop, and put the hood down. Now, that would be a really good idea to have for today. But I think, Jim Roller, that you would agree with me that this is something which is, it's just lump in the throat time.
It certainly is. When you see a piece of history like this, it almost takes me back to Amelia Island when we had those 2 great Bentleys, and that's where the Centennial really kicked off, and here it is culminating at Pebble Beach. Chill bumps galore. Bentleys are not the only stars of the show here at Pebble Beach in 2019. This is a Mercedes-Benz SSKL, meaning Super Sport Kurzlicht. It's a lightened streamliner that was designed specifically for racing. This wasn't a production car turned into a race car. This is one of the first Mercedes that was designed specifically for racing. It won Avus in 1932. Besides the streamlined body, the other things that Mercedes did was actually drill holes in the frame to lighten the car. Driver Manfred von Brauchitsch was the winner of the car, and the car was 20 kilometers an hour faster with the streamlined body than it was with the non-streamlined production body.
Now this is a car steeped in history. It's a Ferrari 412P, and it's special and different because you can see the blue stripe that is going all the way up the car. Now this was the colours of Maranello Concessionaires. They were the UK importers of Ferraris, and they would have a red Ferrari but with this blue stripe. It was always their colours, always the way they ran. And you can also see that on the side of the car here, we have the blue Speedbird, as it was called, and the Speedbird was the logo of British Overseas Airways Corporation, BOAC, and that they sponsored 2 races at Brands Hatch, a 1,000-kilometre race and a 6-hour race, and that was just to show that the car had taken part in the race. This car, driven by Richard Atwood, driven by a number of British privateers, and that it then was taken over by David Piper and ran in his famous emerald green livery for some time. Now it's been converted back into that original colour scheme that it ran in periods so successfully.
Here we are with a magnificent Bugatti that was built by Greg Jones as a tribute to his dad, who was one of the great restorers of Bugattis and Ferraris, as Greg has followed the family firm. And with me is his sister Suzanne. And Suzanne, this was a tribute car that was done for your dad, wasn't it?
Yes, my dad did part of the original restoration, and my brother Greg and the assistance of my brother Raymond did the final restoration just recently. It's just fabulous to see it actually running again, because for the longest time it wasn't, and the power of hearing it after so long of being silenced is exhilarating.
Now I know as children, you kids got to spend a lot of time in Europe. Is that where the family love of Bugattis and Ferraris comes from?
My dad was in World War II, following Patton. He fell in love with France and the Bugattis, of course. That just happened. And so, yes, when we were young, he moved 7 of the 9 children abroad to France, and he could continue his collecting and restoration there. And then he brought that back to the United States again in the late 70s. And this is, Greg has been very capable with restoring Ferraris on his own. He's come to this fabulous show. I think this is his 10th year here, and his first time representing a legacy Bugatti. So,
now,
very special.
Is this because of the fact that it is the family legacy car? Is this your favorite?
Yes. And it's Robert Benoit. He had a great story. He was sponsoring the resistance and getting the arms from England to fight Hitler, and so he was a great driver and a great man, and Hitler was out to get him, and he managed to escape captivity once and come back and continue helping fund the resistance, and then Hitler did find him, and sadly he hung him. So Hitler had a problem with anyone who would beat the Mercedes. You can't beat a German car and get away with it. So that a bit is a tragedy, and that's something that had my dad's heart. I asked him, what is it about Bugatti that you love so much? Why do we have so many? And he said it's a tragedy, the family story. And I love the furniture, the design. I mean, Bugatti is so versified. And so he was glad to share that with me, but I didn't realize that he loved the family. He really respected the people, the designers.
Well, that's fantastic. And you find that every car here at Pebble Beach has a story. And Paul Tarsey has the story of an Alfa Romeo that was another car that got under the skin of Adolf Hitler.
And this is that car. It's an Alfa Romeo Tipo B, the P3. I'm here with Fred Russell, who is the man who has, I'm not sure whether it's the pleasure or the responsibility, Fred, to look after this car.
Luckily, it is the pleasure. Always pleasure on these things.
Now, these cars were hugely successful in period, weren't they?
Right, they were. They're incredibly dominant in every race they entered, there was only a few of these made. They all raced in the Grand Prix style racing, with the exception of one. One was also modified to be a street car, raced in some of the Targa Florios and things like the Mille Miglia, where it won the Mille Miglia. This one spent its entire life as a Grand Prix car.
And some of the races it did?
Well, this did the most significant race as far as I'm concerned. In 1934, Hitler was very angry at the fact that the Germans did not win the Grand Prix at the Nürburgring. So he invested a huge amount of money to create the Silver Arrows, the Mercedes, the auto unions. Well, in 1935, with those cars entered on the field at the Nürburgring, Tazio Nuvolari showed up with this 1-year-old 300 horsepower car to do battle with those 400 horsepower Silver Arrows.
And this is that car.
This is that car.
Now, every petrol head in the world has seen the photographs, and some have seen some of those really scratchy video pieces of that event, and this was actually the car.
This is the car. And, it was a tough fight to win that race because, obviously 300 horsepower. But one of the joys is that back then, all that German money bought some phenomenal cars, but they did not improve the tire technology. So in that 1 year, the tire technology had not improved. The tires on this matched perfectly to the horsepower, perfectly to the weight, perfectly to the driver. So he was able to drive this car and stay up there. And when the white flag came out, he was in second place with only von Brauchitz ahead of him. And at that point, he only had 12 miles to go, and he made the pass. He crossed that finish line in the lead, won that race.
Much to the annoyance, I think, of the powers that be.
Exactly. This car then sat out for the next year or so. It didn't really race, but then it got into the hands of other people, and it raced for quite a few years, and then kind of enjoyed being a sporting racer all the way up through the 50s, and then luckily fell into the hands of historical-minded folks who then put everything back together perfectly, and we now have the car.
And where does it live now?
Now it resides up in the Bellevue, Washington area. However, it's if you look at the stickers all over the window, you realize we vintage race this on a regular basis. So it's been out vintage racing a couple times this year. In fact, we would have been at Laguna Seca right now if it wasn't for the request to be here on the lawn.
That's one hell of a decision to have to make.
It's a tough choice, but every once in a while we can sit one out.
And this is a joy to see this, and I was getting goosebumps on my arms just seeing it earlier on. Now I know its history.
It's great.
It just blows me away.
Fun.
Thank you so much for bringing it.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Hot rod culture in the 60s was huge. It was rekindled in the 80s with the great American movie American Graffiti. Here at Pebble Beach, they have a whole section of cars that are dedicated to hot rod cover cars, meaning they appeared in Hot Rod magazine. These are the toys that the boys dreamed of, but the men got to own. Let's now go to Paul, who's got a great Maserati story.
When people talk about Italian sports racing cars, they very often immediately think of Ferraris, but this is the other part of that. This is a Maserati. Not any Maserati. It has actually been driven and won at Monza with Sterling Moss at the wheel. Obviously, with right-hand drive, as most sports racing cars did have in period, keep the weight to the inside of the corner, bearing in mind that most circuits were clockwise in direction. This car was then bought by Lance Reventlow, who was heir to the Woolworth fortune. He was heir to it, and he spent most of it on lovely racing cars, so we mustn't disagree with that. But this is a Maserati, absolutely lovely. Pick of the show.
This may look like a Porsche 906 or 904, but in fact, it's a Howmet TX Coupe. Now, in the 60s, the jet age was dawning, and as you can imagine, racing innovators thought that perhaps gas turbines were the way to go. Now, you may remember in 1967, Andy Granatelli brought a turbine car to the Indianapolis 500. But turbine technology predated that car. The first turbine cars were raced at Le Mans when British Rover teamed up with BRM to race a car in 1963. The Howmet TX made its debut at the 1968 24 Hours of Daytona, and then later it was raced at the 24 Hours of Le Mans and the 12 Hours of Sebring. But at the end of the 1968 season, Howmet canceled its racing program, and the car was consigned to history. One of the highlights of the 2019 Pebble Beach Concours d'Elegance is the celebration of Ferrari's 90 years. Now, if you know anything about cars, you know that Ferrari, as a car builder, started after the war. So, Paul, how do we get a 90-year celebration?
It's stretching the point a bit, if I'm honest. But we've all seen those pictures of the pre-war Alfa Romeos with what we now know as the Ferrari logo on the front of them. The cavallino rampante, as they say in Italian, the prancing horse. And that's because Enzo Ferrari, I mean, we always think of him as the grey-haired man with the dark glasses, the commendatore, but he wasn't always that. He was a driver, he was a racer, and then latterly he ran the factory team of Alfa Romeos. So I think that's how they've got to that point of it being 90 years.
And here is one of those Alfa Romeos that Enzo Ferrari used to cut his racing teeth, for lack of a better term. It's an Alfa Romeo 8C, Paul.
It is, and Enzo Ferrari actually drove these, as well as creating what became the Ferrari team and then the marque. And you can see on the front of this car the CFAC Ferrari signs, the Cavallino Rampante, and that was the very beginnings of the Ferrari team and everything else. Looking at this car, fabulous. I got a big lump in my throat just now when I looked in there, and this has a central accelerator pedal. So can you imagine here in 2019 having to drive that either on a road or on a track with a central pedal?
That's frightening. Just the thought of it is more frightening than I want to deal with.
One of the things here, of course, is that because of the style of cars in the period, we have these cycle type wings on the front, which meant that you could take them off and it was a Grand Prix car to all intents and purposes. But then later on, what you could do is stick those back on, either drive the car home, or alternatively, you could go sports car racing as well. So it was very, very different from what we know now. Dark red, of course, which still is the Alfa Romeo racing colour. Dark red rather than the blood red that Ferrari later adopted, but very much an Alfa Romeo through and through. It looks the part just standing still. This is a special car. On the side we have Brian Redman and Ottaro Mazzario's name. Tremendous characters, both of whom are involved with racing still. And we saw Brian Redman out at Laguna Seca this weekend. This car is a 312 PB. People often talk about Formula One cars with bodywork. This is it. This was straight out of the Formula One stable. It had the flat 12 engine. It had a top speed of about 320 kilometers per hour, very quick. It was an absolute winner everywhere it went. But over the years, they developed that into a different kind of car, and Jim Roller has found its younger brother.
Younger brother is right, Paul. In 1994, this Ferrari 333 SP changed the face of sports prototype racing around the world. It made its debut in the third race of the 1994 IMSA series. I was lucky enough to actually be at the first test for the car at Road Atlanta, and the buzz around Ferrari returning to sports car racing in 1994 was absolutely off the charts. This car, the 1999 model, has some upgrades on it. It is a V12, of course, as all the Ferrari sports cars were, but this model, the 333 SP, brought Ferrari back to the hallowed ground of sports car racing after a long absence, and it really did alter the landscape for sports prototype racing throughout the world.
We stand here on the lawns at Pebble Beach Concours d'Elegance with this beautiful Ferrari, but the thing is, this isn't where this car came about, because this car, built in 1959, won Le Mans in 1960. It's a 250 Testarossa, the original Testarossa. And you can see here, built to the regulations, that they had to have this tall windshield because that was part of what was required within the regulations. But you can also see here the guard from insects and bugs and everything else. Interestingly, again, you've got the trumpets from the top of the engine there, which are off-center. And not only are they off-center, they're canted over as well. So don't see this car as something which is on the Pebble Beach lawn. Think of it in 1960, driving through Le Mans with Olivier Gendebien and Paul Frère at the wheel of this absolutely superb motor car.
When your car is in a field of significant Ferraris, and you say this is one of the most significant Ferraris on the field, you better have the facts to back it up. And this is one of those significant cars. It's listed as a 1954 250 Monza, but in fact the car has a lot more history than that. It was raced successfully from 54 to 57 in Europe. Then the car was imported to the United States by Luigi Canetti, thus the white paint scheme with the blue stripe. Those are the colors of NART, the North American racing teams, and you can see the logo on the back of the car. Why is it significant that this car is here on this 90th anniversary of Ferrari display? Yesterday, this car was on the auction block at Mecum Auctions.
Let's take a look at the racers that took home honours from the judges. The Art Center College of Design Award went to the 1967 Ferrari 412P in the colours of Ferrari importer Maranello Concessionaires. Another of the cars that we profiled earlier on was the 1968 Howmet TX with the jet turbine helicopter engine. That piece of motorsport history claimed this year's Pebble Beach Concours Chairman's Trophy. The Phil Hill Cup is named for America's first Formula One world champion, and that went to the 1929 Bentley 4.5-litre Blower Le Mans Tourer, owned by clothing designer Ralph Lauren. Another American-centric award is the Tony Hulman Trophy. The award, named after the patriarch of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, was taken home by a special car from the Speedway, the 1919 Ballot Indy Race car from the Miles Collier collection at Revs Institute. And finally, the most prestigious award in the Concours world, the Pebble Beach Concours d'Elegance Best in Show, went to the 1931 Bentley 8-litre Gurney Nutting Tourer, owned by the Honourable Sir Michael Kaduri from Hong Kong. Some very happy class and special award winners.
Paul Tarsey, a beautiful venue, a beautiful event. The bucket list just keeps getting checked.
Doesn't it, Justin? And I knew that this was going to be good. I knew that we were going to have fun. I didn't know how good and how much fun we were going to have, because just looking around, the quality of the entry here has been amazing. There are so many people here. I can't believe how many people are here. It just is something which, it's the tick on the bucket list. And as we stand in front of this competition, real Bugatti, and absorb all the scenery, everything behind us out here, it's been great. And I know you've enjoyed it too.
Oh, it's been fantastic. What's going to be your takeaway car?
Oh, no, you can't do that to me.
I didn't warn him I was going to do that.
I think probably it's going to be one of the Ferraris. Which one? Who cares?
For me, it was the Mercedes Streamliner. I've never seen one of those cars, and to see one of those and be able to touch it and really get a feel for what that car was like, just what a monster it was and how crude and rough it was. And to think, I've seen Avus, and to see that car, now I can picture that car in my mind's eye, winning at Avus. That is what I'll carry from this event. We hope you've enjoyed our coverage on historicracingnews.com. Check us out on the website. Check us out on our podcast, Rev It Up. And don't forget, you can see everything on our YouTube channel, historicracingnews.com as well. So lots of places to find us. Hope you enjoyed it.